Mamallapuram all set for the informal summit between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping. Both the leaders to arrive in Tamil Nadu later today for the second informal summit. Mamallapuram bears testimony to ancient ties between the two neighbors. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman meets distressed customers of PMC Bank, says the government will bring in amendment in the winter session of Parliament if needed and to avoid cases like PMC Bank scam. The minister also says she will talk to RBI Governor and convey the urgency and distress of PMC Bank customers. Vice President M. Venkaiah Naidu addresses the Indian diaspora in Comoros, asserts Indian government considers Africa as a focused continent, appreciates overseas Indians for keeping Indian cultural heritage alive. In international news, the UN Security Council fails to agree on a statement on Turkey's counterterrorism operations in Syria. US and Russia veto a statement by 5 European members. France, Germany, Belgium, Britain and Poland condemn the operation. And in sports, India off to a commanding position there in the first test against South Africa in Pune. At lunch, India by 356 for the loss of 3 wickets. Good morning. Welcome to English News at 11:30. I'm Anil Thomas. Now for the stories in detail, starting first up with news from the informal summit in Mamallapuram. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has reached Chennai airport a short while back. It won't be an exaggeration to say that India, led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and China under President Xi Jinping have introduced the concept of informal summits into diplomatic parlance. We trace the journey from Wuhan to Mamallapuram. Chinese President Xi Jinping is arriving in India today for the second informal summit. Well, these are visuals of the Prime Minister Narendra Modi arriving a short while ago in Chennai, where he was received by a number of senior officials and members of the Tamil Nadu Assembly there, walking along with the governor and now taking an helicopter to reach.
27th April 2018. Day one of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's 2-day informal Wuhan summit ending with this tune that says it all. In a picture-perfect moment, China saying, "Ye Vada Raha," a promise made to walk side by side with India. And keeping the promise, President Xi will touch down in Chennai for the Mamallapuram summit on Friday. The stage is all set for a grand welcome. The two leaders will walk the talk at historic sites, including the Shore Temple, Arjuna's Penance, and the Panch Rathas. On Saturday, Prime Minister Narendra Modi will host President Xi for one-on-one as well as delegation-level talks at the Fisherman's Cove in Chennai. Rewinding to Wuhan, the warmth and camaraderie both leaders share was visible as they took a long walk by the iconic East Lake. In a key outcome, the two leaders agreed to issue strategic guidance to their militaries to strengthen communications and to build trust and understanding.
It's an opportune time that the two leaders are meeting, and I do hope that the understanding reached between the two leaders at the end of the 2-day summit will provide some stability and predictability to the bilateral relations.
After the walk the talk followed a Nao Pe Charcha. The two leaders took a boat ride on a traditional Chinese wooden boat sporting a pagoda. This was reminiscent of Prime Minister Modi's unique style of hospitality. In 2014, he hosted President Xi in Ahmedabad along the Sabarmati waterfront, creating an informal atmosphere that allows candid exchange of thoughts and ideas. A traditional tea ceremony awaited the leaders on the lake side. Prime Minister Modi shared lighter moments with President Xi, perhaps recalling the days when he was a young boy and he sold tea at a railway station, Vadnagar. The Chai Pe Charcha continued as the two leaders sat down over a cup of tea. Prime Minister Modi was seen poring over a document deep in conversation with President Xi. The leaders of the two Asian giants held 6 meetings in 24 hours, discussing trade, tourism, people-to-people connect, and other regional and global issues, agreeing to strengthen mutual relations in days to come. That multiple aspects of bilateral trade were discussed over the 2 days became evident with India and China identifying terrorism as a major global problem. Within 5 weeks of the Wuhan summit, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Xi Jinping met in Qingdao, ahead of the SCO summit. This was their 14th meeting in a short span of 4 years. The two leaders took forward the agenda set in the informal summit. Both countries inked 2 agreements after the bilaterals. The first agreement enables the Chinese side to provide hydrological data about the Brahmaputra River in flood season. It also enables the Chinese side to provide hydrological data if water levels exceed mutually agreed levels during non-flood season. The second agreement relates to facilitation of export of rice from India to China. In 2018, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Xi also met during the BRICS summit in Johannesburg, as well as on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Buenos Aires. In 2019, the two leaders met during the SCO summit in Bishkek and on the sidelines of the Osaka G20 summit. The power-packed 2 days at Mamallapuram will be their 3rd meeting this year.
Be it issues of trade, defense, security cooperation, terror, increasing people-to-people contacts, updating the CBM, so the confidence-building measures along the line of control, resolving the border issue, which has been going on for a very, very long time. So the idea is to pick up the threads from the first informal summit, which happened in Wuhan, in China, and then use Mahabalipuram to pick up the threads from there and build on the bonhomie and the chemistry that we saw between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi to take the relationship to newer and greater heights.
The 21st century is often described as Asia's century, and India, led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, as well as China by President Xi Jinping, are partnering to ensure this becomes a reality.
With cameraman S. Jaishankar, Amritpal Singh, DD News, Mahabalipuram.
And now we decode why Mamallapuram has been chosen as the venue for the second informal summit between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping. Mamallapuram is also known as Mahabalipuram. The name is said to be derived from the word Mamalam, which means great warrior, a reference to King Narasimhavarman, a Pallav dynast who took forward India-China ties in 6th century AD.
Taking a step forward to strengthen the ancient ties between India and China, Prime Minister Narendra Modi will meet Chinese President Xi Jinping in Mamallapuram for an informal summit. Mamallapuram has been a witness to the 1700-year-old ties of these two ancient civilizations. The city is world famous for ancient temple architecture. According to historians, this capital city of the Pallava kingdom is important in terms of trade. Ancient Chinese, Persian and Roman coins dating back to the 7th century were found here, indicating its existence as a seaport. Historians believe that during the 6th and 7th centuries, a Chinese traveller, Xuanzang, visited India and received a grand welcome by the Pallava king, Mahendravarman, during this period. It is said that the Chinese were well versed with the city and frequently visited it for trade. Mahendravarman's son, Narasimhavarman, played a vital role in expanding trade ties with China and even sent his ambassadors there. It is believed that the Chinese had close connections with Kanchipuram as it was a pilgrimage for them during that period. India and China not only had trade relations but also share a deep spiritual connection. Historians believe that the Buddhist monk Bodhidharma was related to the Pallavas. Born in India, he travelled to China in 526 AD, taking the religious philosophy with him. He travelled via the sea route and established the practice of meditation there.
Historically, if you look at the flow of Buddhism. It happens from India to the Chinese, and subsequently, of course, the form of Buddhism that's practiced in China has a lot of other influences, the Zen form of Buddhism. And the interesting thing is that even as the Chinese were also making some kind of maritime outreach towards Southeast Asia, and even as India was making cultural trade outreach to those regions, we never had these instances of India and China getting into warlike situations.
This is not the first time that Prime Minister Modi is hosting a foreign leader outside the national capital. He had hosted President Xi in Ahmedabad in 2014. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe also stayed at Ahmedabad during his India visit. Similarly, French President Emmanuel Macron experienced Indian culture on the ghats of the river Ganga at Varanasi, giving the world leaders a glimpse of incredible India. Interestingly, when the Prime Minister went to China for the first time, President Xi hosted him in Xi'an, his hometown, instead of Beijing. Bureau Report, DD News.
Well, our correspondent Amritpal Singh, who's in Mamallapuram, joins us with more. Amritpal, how much of water has flown through from Wuhan to Mamallapuram purely in terms of promises and deliverables when these two leaders meet?
Anil, that's a good question. I mean, what really happened at Wuhan was that was the first Indo-China, India-China informal summit at the summit level where the two leaders, that's President Xi and Prime Minister Modi, met. Now, this had come, after the Doklam, just after Doklam. So, in that sense, the idea was to have a meeting in an informal way, address difficult issues in an informal setting where the two leaders have a freewheeling chat, where the two leaders meet without their aides and the diplomats and the bureaucrats, and they can basically build a comfort factor and reach reach a situation where the two leaders, if so feel, can guide impetus. Now, at that time, the main outcome of the Wuhan summit was that they would give strategic guidance to their militaries. We've seen that after that, there hasn't been no face-off. Incursions and transgressions do take place along the LAC, the line of actual control, because the border is disputed. The perceptions where your border begins are different from their perceptions. So the PLA moves in, the Indian Army moves in, but what is important is that not a shot has been fired. Those situations are diffused amicably. Now, what I think is that at this meeting, the idea would be to upgrade these CBMs, the confidence-building measures, to strengthen them and take them to the next level where more defense cooperation can happen. You don't do actual joint drills, so to speak, but there are many military exchanges, though there is one joint military exercise called Hand in Hand, but it's not like a full-fledged military exercise in the sheer term of it. But yes, the Indian Navy ships do pay visits. A lot of exchanges happen. Now, when you do all this, there is a certain comfort level that comes between two armies, and the CBMs along the CBMs at the LAC are now they need to be upgraded because there have been technological improvements, surveillance improvements, improvements in surveillance equipment and things like that. Now, so I expect that when the two leaders meet one-on-one and followed by delegation-level talks tomorrow, so this could be one major outcome that we could see. Though that may, then the other thing that could be, which may not really be announced this time around, but yes, when the SR talks happen, the special representative level talks happen, we could see some sort of announcement on that. So in practical terms, one could see forward movement in that during this summit.
Amrit, purely looking at this visit coming at a time when there is a lot of uncertainty in the world, especially in view of what Donald Trump's reinterpretation of US role in global affairs is, does this present an opportunity both for India as well as China?
Absolutely. It gives a great opportunity for both India and China because their concerns are similar. But from a trade point of view, what would be weighing on the mind of the Indians more is how to, get more market access, how to, though it was agreed at Wuhan to give more market access, for example, in the areas of non-basmati rice, sugar, cement, rapeseeds. But the surplus movement hasn't been that much. The dividends haven't been that much. Now, I think the two leaders, when they meet tomorrow, would be seeing, would be discussing.
Well, Amrit, I'll just ask you to hold your thoughts there at this point of time. The Prime Minister's chopper is landed there close to the place where the informal meet is to take place in Mamallapuram. There, at this point of time, the Prime Minister a little while ago had landed in Chennai. From there, he had taken this chopper to Mamallapuram. It's close to the venue where he's going to meet the Chinese president later today. Well, Amrit, as you were speaking about, the role of Donald Trump and his reinterpretation of the US role in global affairs, does this, we spoke about the similarity, but does this, present a great opportunity for both India and China to come closer?
That's right, it does. As I was saying, that, that is one thing the two leaders would want to work on. The Chinese would be very interested in that. From an Indian standpoint, would be interested in is, looking at reducing the trade deficit, which is more than about $60–70 billion. Now, that is what the Indians would be looking at, that how more market access is granted and to the Indians more areas of market access, and also the bottlenecks that exist are taken off. So I think that would be one area where the two leaders would be talking, because out of the $95 billion of trade that exists, it's only about $19 billion of exports that we do. So there is a huge yawning deficit there. So I think from an Indian standpoint, the Indians would be negotiating hard, especially during the delegation level talks, to see that in the areas that have already been decided and some other areas that they can look at, this can be opened. The Chinese would, of course, be interested, because now after the U.S. threatens to put trade restrictions, and so India becomes a natural partner, and India being such a big market right next door, so it is only natural that the Chinese would be interested in scaling up this engagement. And as we speak, we can see on our TV screens that the Prime Minister has arrived. We can see External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar, National Security Advisor Ajit Doval getting off this helicopter. This is at Mamallapuram. The Prime Minister from here would be going to the Fisherman's Cove. Here we can see the Prime Minister getting alighting from the helicopter, the chopper that he took from Chennai a little while back, and arriving in Mamallapuram. He will be readying himself for greeting President Xi this evening at about 5 p.m. at the Krishna's Butter Ball, where he would be, taking the Chinese, with the visiting dignitary, the Chinese president. From there, it's a nice, well-manicured lawn walk up to the Arjuna's Penance, and then he would then take him to the Panch Rathas. These are UNESCO World Heritage Sites which date back to the Pallav dynasty, 7th century AD monuments, and from there they would go to the Shore Temple, where there's a cultural evening organized for President Xi. As you were running the story, that what happened at Wuhan, the setting was informal. They took a walk by the East Lake. So here the Prime Minister would be returning the hospitality, especially in a very in a setting which has had historical and cultural ties with the Chinese. Remember, during the Pallav dynasty, during the Chola dynasty, it was this seat of governance, Mamallapuram in Kanchipuram, from where they had a lot of trade with them. It was the Pallav prince turned monk Bodhidharma, who actually took Zen Buddhism from Mahabalipuram to China, and he basically took it to the Fujian province, of which President Xi himself has been governor before he was president. So he very well understands that, and I think Prime Minister Modi would be wanting to use this setting of Mamallapuram to reach out to President Xi. And tomorrow, when the two leaders sit at the Fisherman's Cove and discuss issues of diplomacy, of bilateral engagement. They may seem difficult issues, but if in an informal setting it's approached, so that softens up a lot of things. The atmosphere is right, and the two leaders can make a lot of forward movement, which may not happen, or there are impediments to that when, say, diplomats sit down and then come to roadblocks. It's the political leadership that can give the vision, and so I think this second summit, informal summit, India-China second informal summit after the Wuhan summit, would be a step forward in that direction.
Amrit, purely looking at the progress, on an economic aspect between the two countries, do you see India pushing hard, considering that there is a trade war already existing between America and China? India pushing hard to narrow that huge trade gap or the huge trade deficit that exists between India and China?
Anil, can you please repeat your question?
I said, considering that there is a trade war on between America and China, do you see India leveraging something here purely in terms of, narrowing that trade deficit that exists between India and China in getting something more during this informal summit?
Absolutely. India would want to come in, and it suits India to come in, and it also is mutually beneficial because now given the trade war with the US, the Chinese would be looking at an increased or scaled up engagement with other countries, and what better than a country with such a huge market right next door. And so India in that sense becomes a natural partner. India would obviously want engagement with the Chinese when it comes to trade. And, though the deficit issue is a big issue, but there are various sectors that the two countries would like to participate in. There is some sort of participation when it comes to the health sector or the education sector, but it also has a lot of scope for more engagement. And another very important thing, I think, which the two leaders will be addressing is people-to-people contact, and that can really lead the way forward to when it comes to trade. Because right now the engagement really is that you have a few students studying mostly medicine in China, but as you approach the 70th diplomatic anniversary of the 70th anniversary of diplomatic ties, more people-to-people engagement happens. Right now, trading happens, say, on the eastern coast posts, the southeastern coast posts of China. Now, when you take the relationship, if the two leaders set a template which could take a relationship towards, say, joint manufacturing and scale that up. So I think that those areas, there is a lot that exists. A lot of companies would want to collaborate with each other. There are security concerns. So one is not saying that there are no concerns. There are, but the possibilities are galore.
Also considering Chennai being picked for this the southern state of Chennai being picked for this informal summit, somewhere is it, another step forward taken by Prime Minister Modi in showcasing, incredible India to world leaders?
That's right, Anil. It has been Prime Minister Modi's style of diplomacy to bring in a personal touch and, say, the very formal settings of Hyderabad House in Delhi. We've seen that in the past. We've seen that how he took Shinzo Abe, the Japanese Prime Minister, to, say, Aarti in Banaras or Varanasi, or even with President Xi, the two leaders that iconic picture of the two leaders sitting on a swing on the Sabarmati riverfront and enjoying Gujarati Garba and Gujarati delicacies. And so, or taking Angela Merkel to Bangalore. So, this is what now by choosing Mahabalipuram because of, as I said, the historic and cultural ties with China and a different setting. Or tomorrow when the two leaders take a walk by the shore of the Bay of Bengal on India's east coast. He not only puts out the culture, the rich culture and tradition of South India, but he also moves the engagement out of the confines of a formal, imposing structure of Hyderabad House to a more relaxed setting of, say, the Bay of Bengal, when the gentle sea breeze blows and the two leaders walk on the sand and talk. So that sets a different setting, and he's showcasing the culture, the delicacy of South India, and South India's had traditionally, especially Tamil Nadu's had trade ties with China, not from just today, but for a long time, since 7th century AD, during the Pallav dynasty, of whose seat has been Kanchipuram. So I think that the Prime Minister is utilizing in a very potent way.
Also considering, India and China, have, many things in similar, but will this particular informal meet between the two countries, be closely watched by another neighboring leader, Pakistan, considering, the growing bonhomie between India and China?
Yes, I think Pakistan would be very closely watching.
Amrit, I'll ask you to hold your thoughts there. We're running short of time. Thank you and appreciate you joining us this morning with us on this program. Well, now let's shift focus to elections picking up pace in Haryana and Maharashtra, and let's go to Chandigarh, where the Congress Haryana manifesto is being released.
और फिर मैं चंद शब्द बोलूंगी, हुड्डा साहब बोलेंगे और किरण जी अपनी बात रखेंगे। तो सबसे पहले मैं आग्रह करती हूं कि हम घोषणा पत्र का विमोचन करें।
हरियाणा प्रदेश कांग्रेस कमेटी के अध्यक्ष कुमारी शैलजा जी, सीएलपी के लीडर और भूतपूर्व मुख्यमंत्री मोहतरम हुड्डा साहब, मैनिफेस्टो कमेटी की चेयरपर्सन किरण चौधरी जी, हमारे भूतपूर्व केंद्रीय मंत्री पवन बंसल जी, और इसके साथ कन्वीनर एंड को कन्वीनर जो मैनिफेस्टो कमेटी के थे आफ्ताब अहमद साहब और शरीश गुप्ता जी, पवन खेड़ा जी और सभी पत्रकार भाइयों, आप सबका बहुत बहुत स्वागत। आज के इस घोषणा पत्र कांग्रेस पार्टी का जो जारी किया गया, अभी इसकी कॉपीज आप सबको मिलेंगी अभी तुरंत बाद। बहुत ही अच्छा घोषणा पत्र है। मैं बधाई देना चाहता हूं चेयरपर्सन और उनके सभी साथियों को के, और जिसमें पीसीसी प्रेसिडेंट और हुड्डा साहब, इन्होंने भी देखा और उसमें अपने सुझाव दिए। ये सब सीनियर लीडर्स उसमें मौजूद थे और सभी सीनियर लीडर्स का कंट्रीब्यूशन इस मैनिफेस्टो को बनाने में लगा है। और मैं समझता हूं कि हाल में ये एक बहुत ही क्रांतिकारी, रेवोल्यूशनरी मैनिफेस्टो है जिसमें समाज के हर एक वर्ग का ख्याल रखा गया। हमारे देश की लोक संख्या का आधा हिस्सा हमारी बहनों, बहु बेटियों, माओं पर निर्भर है। उनका विशेष ध्यान रखा गया। बच्चों की पढ़ाई के लिए, उनकी सुरक्षा के लिए, समाज में उनका कैसे मान सम्मान हो, और सर्विस में और राजनीति में दोनों में किस तरह से हमारी बहु बेटियों और माओं बहनों को बराबर का हिस्सा मिले। 33% रिजर्वेशन की बात की गई है सर्विस में। एक बहुत इनकलाबी कदम है। शायद किसी भी राज्य में सर्विस में रिजर्वेशन का किसी ने वादा नहीं किया है 33%। इसी तरह से पंचायत में, म्युनिसिपैलिटीज में, कॉरपोरेशंस में 50% रिजर्वेशन महिलाओं के बारे में चर्चा की गई है। हाउस टैक्स
दोनों ओर को खेमे लग चुके हैं। एक और मोदी जी के नेतृत्व में, देवेंद्र जी के नेतृत्व में, उद्धव ठाकरे जी के नेतृत्व में भाजपा और शिवसेना इकट्ठा खड़े हैं, आरपीआई खड़ी है, और दूसरी ओर एनसीपी और कांग्रेस खड़ी दिखाई। मित्रों, ये दोनों खेमों का एक संस्कृति है। ये एनसीपी और कांग्रेस अपने परिवार के लिए चलने वाली पार्टियां है। भाजपा और शिवसेना देश के लिए चलने वाली पार्टी है। महाराष्ट्र की जनता ने ये तय करना है कि देश के लिए राजनीति में काम करने वाली पार्टियां चाहिए या अपने परिवार को आगे बढ़ाने वाली पार्टियां चाहिए। मित्रों, मैं आज महाराष्ट्र की जनता को कहने आया। अभी अभी लोकसभा का चुनाव समाप्त हुआ। ये महाराष्ट्र की महान जनता ने बोले शंकर बाबा की तरह भारतीय जनता पार्टी पर कृपा कर दी। जितने डाल सके उतने कमल भाजपा की झोली में, मोदी जी की झोली में डाल दिए, और मोदी जी फिर से देश के प्रधानमंत्री बने। जो प्रधानमंत्री भी 300 से ज्यादा सीटों के साथ, और आपके आशीर्वाद से मोदी जी ने प्रधानमंत्री बनने के बाद सबसे पहला जो सत्र आया, वो सत्र के अंदर मोदी जी ने सबसे पहला काम किया, धारा 370 को उठा। ये धारा 370 जो कश्मीर को भारत के साथ जोड़ने के लिए एक सबसे बड़ा रोडक, सबसे बड़ा रोडक, मगर इसके सामने देखने की हिम्मत देश में कई सरकारें आई। 70 साल के अंदर कई प्रधानमंत्री आए, किसी ने हिम्मत नहीं करी। मोदी जी जब आए, उन्होंने 5 अगस्त को 370
तो अभी आप ये सीधी तस्वीर देख रहे थे महाराष्ट्र के बुल्ढाना के चिखली से, जहां भाजपा अध्यक्ष अमित शाह एक चुनावी रैली को संबोधित कर रहे थे। बढ़ेंगे आगे और बात करेंगे इस वक्त की ताजा तरीन सुर्खियों पर एक निगाह।